there is such an emphasis on growth in the UK, despite what's happening globally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you walked in to see an existing customer and you said, I'm going to tell you what the art of possible is, I think people would switch off.
Because it's not about the art of the possible now, it's about those relevant challenges and what is that customer experiencing right now.
More and more of our partners are using that data to be able to define strategy. Now, that's not in itself innovative, but what is potentially innovative is how to turn that data into a marketing message.
Welcome back to Soapbox, the podcast where we share practical insights from industry experts on the pressing issues around achieving B2B business growth. I'm Charlotte, CEO and founder of Ice Blue Sky, and I'll allow this week's guest to introduce themselves.
Robin is my name. I work for Cisco. I lead one of the teams within the partner channel who are entirely focused on partner growth and profitability.
Excellent.
Awesome. And I'm Francesca, director at Ice Blue Sky. I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're just about to have, which is about what are the market dynamics that we're seeing in the UK&I industry at the moment, and what effective sales and marketing strategies are we seeing where channel partners are really winning. So I think, like, just to kick us off, Robin, did you want to talk about what are the market dynamics that you're seeing at the moment?
So for a bit of context for you, Cisco's business in the UK is vast majority through partners. It's very rarely that we would have a direct operational relationship with an end customer. Therefore, the partner channel for us is absolutely crucial.
Absolutely.
And we have a number of classification of partners across the board, across multiple architectures on our technology, but really there's a commonality that runs through all our partners, which is that currently as it stands, the acquisition of new logo customers is becoming, I'm not going to say it's becoming harder, but it's becoming more of a discerning concept. There's a number of different reasons for that we're seeing. One is customers or potential buyers are shifting from the traditional procurement position to across multiple lines of business. And that becomes a challenge for traditional sales people.
Yeah.
Because they have to adapt their conversation and they got to make it relevant. The second one is that the customer or the buyer or the budget holder is becoming more discerning and understanding what they want.
Absolutely.
And therefore, salespeople are asked to be more of a business person than a salesperson. And that's quite a shift from where we used to be, where it was a case of, okay, so you want to reduce costs, you want greater capability, you want visibility, understand all of that, here's the solution. We're actually trying to get under the skin a bit more of actually solving business outcomes. And that's a challenge. It's a different mindset. It's an entirely different mindset. Now, controversially, it's been like that for maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we solved the problem? I would argue no, because because the partner community, certainly in our world, are not reactive. That's the wrong way of putting it, but they are in a position where they are having to create value using technology that potentially they're in competition with other partners with that have the same technology.
And
right?
connecting that to the business, what are those business strategies and how does that then connect into the technology side of things, and how can they become those trusted advisors in those industries or those specific challenge areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And trusted advisor piece is a really important part. Now, we've been talking about trusted advisors for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
We had an interesting conversation in the office, in the team actually, not so long ago. Is how do you know you've become a trusted advisor? How do you classify that metric? And we've had a number of responses. Well, actually, it's the partner opens up to you about things they wouldn't normally open up to you, or you're their first port of call when it comes to a particular technical or operational issue. But actually, I think it's a bit deeper than that. Your relationships go beyond the four walls of the office or the water cooler. Your relationships are beyond that. I mean, I had a member of the team a couple of years ago who used to do gaming with one of his partners after hours.
Yeah.
And they lived quite close to each other, but they became great friends as well. It's that kind of relationship now you need, where you create that scenario whereby actually whatever you say, whether it's controversial or not, or whether the opinion or whether you're challenging a particular technological state, becomes accepted.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And I think there is such an emphasis on growth in the UK, despite what's happening globally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And despite what's happening potentially even closer to us in the European market and how that's going to play out and the uncertainty that sits, the challenge really is for how do we adapt with our customer? And you can only do that when you have that trusted relationship, I think.
Definitely. And I think it speaks to something I know we've all talked about before, which is that value delta for the partner over and above the technology. You know, how are they good at articulating that, for example? And I think to your point about trusted advisor, I think it's when you are proactively going out into market with solutions that are ahead of where the customers are. I think that is a really good reflection of a strong partnership between vendor and partner, when you're proactively trying to solve problems and then taking that out to market. And I totally agree with you. And I think that's so important.
It becomes a real challenge, I think, to define what an outcome is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've been a buyer in the past and I've said my challenge actually prioritize wise is I just need to reduce my costs.
Yeah.
I want the same for less.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a really difficult position for any partner to be in because they're thinking, right, we want to retain the customer because it's a revenue stream that is important to us. And the other side of that equation is, but I can't really get below price. So what you then end up doing is, okay, so let us talk beyond budget, right? So then the outcomes are, well, always comes back to, I want to reduce my budget. Whereas it could be something like, I want to increase our productivity.
Yeah.
I want to increase our access. I want to increase our security. I want to be able to, quite simply from a CIO or a CTO's perspective, sit down on a board meeting and say, I've got this covered.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was being trained as an account manager, it was always a question of, as soon as you heard something technological, you went, oh, we can do that.
Yeah.
But actually now you have to think a little laterally. And unless you have a logical thought process in your head, it's really difficult. Everything in your fiber is going, I need to talk about that because I recognize that word and that word means that.
That's my comfort zone.
There's a spider
and
map
it's a linking.
that comes up.
Yeah.
Just take a moment. I sometimes say to the team, I said, silence is okay.
Yeah.
It's not
really
the case
good
of
tool.
first to talk will lose.
But often if you have that silence, people feel compelled to fill it. And that's when you get some really valuable information. But I love that point you were just saying there, Robin, about, the customer's trying to push you down. I just want the same for less. But actually having the confidence to be able to say, well, what does that really mean? And then understanding where the value is to help create the business case actually for what they do need. Or not be pushed down to say, okay, well, if you want the same for less, what's the really key bits that you must not lose, and then start to discuss the value of those individual bits. But I think it's difficult in this climate.
It's hugely
to take
difficult
that
in the technological
confidence.
world because Cisco and other brands similar to us who are creating technology and creating opportunity under the art of what's technologically possible, are continually pushing those boundaries really quickly. And if you walked in to see an existing customer and you said, I'm going to tell you what the art of possible is, I think people would switch off because it has no relevance.
And it's ethereal, isn't it? It's like, well, I kind of know what's possible, but actually I've got 18 fires over here that I'm trying to put out on a constant basis. Yeah, I think you're right.
And they would say, that's really interesting and really, but it means nothing to me at all. So I guess going back to the original question is, what are partners? Partners are looking at ways of creating uniqueness in the market using their own skill sets.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have partners who've created automation, zero touch delivery. That's a really important part of how they create value, because despite the fact it's zero touch and it's automated, there is humanity or human interaction behind the outside of it. We have other partners who have created opportunity in a very particular architecture around security, where they're not just monitoring and providing analysis, but they're also doing zero trust. And that zero trust then becomes literally zero trust. And you've got experts sitting in security operations and it's delivering. And that sense of confidence that the boundaries are secure as best as they can be, because there's always bad actors out
And I think the importance around that when they're creating these technological kind of solutions is the narrative and the messaging that's surrounding those, that's connecting, say, that zero trust to that customer and the challenges you were just talking about, because it's not about the art of the possible now. It's about those relevant challenges and what is that customer experiencing right now, and how do we then go to market with the right messaging that we are going to cut through, we are going to stand above, our competitors.
Agreed. And I don't know how, you guys work in the field more, in this particular field more than I do, because I'm technologically led, but it seems to me that there's a huge amount of assumptions being created within businesses around this is how we grow, because they've read it somewhere or LinkedIn says it is, but not many, and I know you guys have done this, but not many go out to customers and say, what are we missing here?
Yeah.
What could we do to enhance our service? So you're actually getting first-hand information back, and that creates the strategy. Now that takes time, effort, and money, frankly.
Yeah.
And in the technological world, we don't have potentially the time, the effort, or the money to spend time doing that, which is where I think this whole outcome-based selling thing came from.
Yeah.
So you're actually getting intelligence the first time you meet.
100%.
Not doing the old survey on the telephone.
Yeah.
No, doesn't work.
Exactly. And I think, marketing has to support that as part of the process. And I think when you put a go-to-market strategy together with a vendor and a partner, is the first step is to really understand, as you were saying, what's that value, what's that niche, what's their secret sauce, if you like, and then build the program around that, because then you're not having to teach your salespeople to be experts in 40 verticals with all the hundreds of use cases that go along with that.
There are some partners that do.
Yeah. There are, yeah.
They want to verticalize on the basis of relevance.
Yeah, exactly.
On the perception of relevance.
But if you teach them the skills around like active listening, how you uncover hidden needs, for example, and then marketing supports that by doing the research at scale. There's lots of tools that help you do that now. So I think then that builds that capability within the organization to uncover that insight.
Absolutely, because what you're doing is you're discovering, what are your value proposition as X, Y, and Z partner? What are the challenges of that customer? And when they overlap, that's your point of view, effectively.
Exactly.
And as disruptive as you can be in challenging the status quo, the better that kind of cut through you will achieve.
And it's less guesswork with the collection of raw data, how you analyze that data.
Yeah.
I mean, Cisco are essentially a data organization. We've got market intelligence. We have our own data. And what we're finding is that more and more of our partners are using that data from their own operations to use that data to be able to define strategy. Now, that's not in itself innovative. People have been doing that for a while. But what is potentially innovative is how to turn that, and I think for the first time, how to turn that data into a marketing message.
Exactly. And the trick to that is you take that data and you use it to tell the prospect something they don't know. Tell
the story.
Yeah.
And create that story around it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what the data says. Let me explain how we've done this before. And if you think about it, almost gone full circle, humans like hearing stories. They get confidence from hearing stories. So if you're, those outcome-based environments where they say, even if it's made up, frankly, those stories give confidence. And that's, again, moving back to that trusted advisor state. I would say, though, that I think, controversially again, there is some of the buyers in the market are becoming reticent and a little belligerent around buying tech.
Yeah, because they don't want to be sold to, do they? And
no one does.
And we all know now how it works. And that's why it's another argument for going down this route, because you've got to work harder and you've got to work almost more subtly to get to that point where they'll trust you and they'll open up, because people are resistant to being sold to and they know the game and they know they could go to 5 different partners.
And probably will anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the ones that stand out are the ones who have that level of understanding that it's your decision.
Yeah.
I'll support you in what decision you make, but let me tell you why the decision should be X.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast and I can't remember the name, so I'll have to insert name of podcast later. But it's an American podcast, but it's about B2B tech selling and buying. and it was a global CIO from a big tech firm, and from a large organization, I think a retailer maybe. And he was being interviewed on the podcast with the account manager that had sold into him from a tech firm. And he said the reason ultimately that he went with that particular firm was because the account manager came in, had uncovered his own insights ahead of the meeting, and with an opener told that guy something he didn't know about his own business.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he said it on the podcast, and he said that was the tipping point, because the other guys came in and just wanted to sell me tech.
Yeah.
And he said, whereas that guy came in, showed he cared, showed he's done his homework, and showed he could add value in the first 5 minutes because he told me something I didn't know about my own company.
And that didn't cost him a cent.
No.
That's very impressive, actually, because having the confidence to do that to start with, and also potentially the ability to articulate that without sounding patronizing.
Yeah,
exactly. So that training is really important. And also one of the things that the account executive said is that the marketing machine helped him with that, helped him with the research, the content that supported that, allowing him to develop as a subject matter expert in that particular vertical, I think in this case. So there's, a lot of people think, it's just luck of the draw in terms of the sort of person you are, sort of account exec you are. But it can be done, but it requires some investment.
We used to say you have to stamp your personality. You can take a story, but you have to put your own personality on it in order for it to become authentic.
Yes.
Be your authentic self.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, I think this is the big change, and this is where we're going into Q4 of our financial year and actually into next year, is we're looking at the data and saying, okay, so not from a sales angle, not from a propensity to buy angle and from an opportunity angle, but from a marketing and story angle. What is the data telling us?
Yeah.
So we have something called One Cisco Story, which is around digital resilience and future workplaces and platform-based environments where it becomes far more agile to deliver an end user experience, not a CIO or IT manager, but an end user experience, which has all been built out of two things. One is market data, our own data, and our own opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And that's so
Opinion.
crucial.
Because you know what you're doing.
Yes.
Well, we're very lucky we have the brand that suggests people, when our specialists talk, people kind of go, oh, that's interesting, and potentially listen. But opinion is also something that our partners are beginning to have.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Because it's that point of view that we talked about.
Correct. And that allows you then to authenticate the story even further because it's your opinion. It's not right or wrong. It's just your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you start having this conversation as opposed to a pitch. You're having a conversation.
Exactly.
Again, you've done all the spade work before that. You've done all the grind work. You've laid, you've spoken to the potential customer. And it's easier to do when you've got an existing account.
Yeah.
The challenge, and this, I'm in awe of these people who are new business hunters.
Yeah.
Because you got to be thick-skinned. You got to be hugely time sensitive in terms of how you manage your own time.
Yeah.
And then the final bit is you've got to be able to articulate on a button exactly what you want to say, when you want to say it, ask the right questions at the right time, and be interesting.
And that's where the organizations need to be focusing their investment, because, it shouldn't just be luck of the draw as to, I just happen to have a salesperson who's really good at that. Yeah. It's the organization needs to put the foundation in place to help them be good at that. So that's where the marketing element comes in, helping them with their social selling approach, for example, and starting conversations organically, and then giving them the tools and the stories that they can then layer over. But it's just so often left up to the individuals, and then it's just, again, luck of the draw based on who they are.
It is. And more, I would say one step further than that is luck of the draw of who they are, but also their desire to succeed.
Yes. And you've got to be hungry to do your business.
I think that comes from within it. I don't think necessarily you can teach that.
No,
I think
can't.
that comes from within. The other thing our partners are interested in building out is using the data in an AI context to build out the story. Now we have I'll give you an example of that. We have our own internal, not chat GPT, we call it Bridget, which is Bridge IT, Bridget. And it's our own internal thing. And we use it a lot. Some use it more than others. But if you put into that, tell me the business outcomes that are absolutely fundamental to the healthcare market, it will produce for you 6 or 7 key fundamentals that are prioritized in order. I mean, it's basically written for you.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you're using AI and you want to use AI from a sales context and a marketing context, take that data. It will produce, it's quick and simple. It will produce that information, not so much ChatGPT, but it certainly will produce that information based on your own data, which again, then provides the authenticity when you're providing.
And I think it provides the scale. And that's a lot of what we do. And we help organizations or partners do, is help them scale that sales function, because we know that only 5% of your potential buyers or your total addressable market are in market at the same time. So you're only going to be successful 5% of any given one moment. So if we can scale, so we can think about clever prompts, clever data to be using to help still be authentic, but still be targeted around the challenges and how we can address those, given that partner value data delta we talked about before, it's crucial to help scale that top end to then have more success at the bottom end, getting people into that sales cycle. Absolutely. And then helping enable that customer further with relevant content as we go through, but aiding that salesperson to have those relevant conversations to build out, exploring that kind of, to your very original point, what is that ultimate business outcome that customer is looking to achieve?
Exactly. And, AI also helps with that kind of insight. Going back to that podcast I was just talking about, where the account exec came in and told that person something they didn't know. You can now use AI to trawl lots of, and this is obviously when you're targeting larger companies, but lots of press interviews, press releases, publicly available information that would probably take you about 6 months to trawl through. But it can distill all of that down and really, really help you go in there armed with that information. And that's where marketing can make a huge difference.
Massive difference. And I think and this is, I guess, the point of the original question, is that I would say certainly in our team, we have 15 partners has significant market share across all public sector, commercial or enterprise and some SMB. They are now taking their data, creating a marketing story, an outcome-based environment, and then going to find a customer who'd like to try this out. Going one step further we were talking about journalism earlier on. It's more about triple checking your sources. Okay, so this is what we think. Let's just test it out on a customer. Now, the challenge with that is the sales cycle is drawn out and pressure for numbers and the whole sales environment. But what it does do is it creates an incredible amount of stickiness.
It does, absolutely.
And trusted advisors.
Yeah.
If you've got the time and effort and resource to do that, particularly in a new technology, AI is on that space when we're talking a lot about AI.
And you can be selective with who you do it.
Of course, yes. You've got to go find a friend.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And having some clear parameters as to the success of that pilot or proof of concept, just so that you can get some data, because data is going to drive us again in the marketplace, not just data in terms of how buyers are buying and what they're seeing in their outcomes, but also internally how our people function in that face-to-face environment, how they continue to change their mindset, how they continue to be educated, because when you go into the workplace, you have to start educating yourself again. You have to start reading the news and understanding LinkedIn, which is relentless. And you have to continue to build but in a different context than your university or school days.
Yeah.
And it's that core, and I think that actually is where decision makers, not buyers, but decision makers and influencers, become that. Build that relationship.
Yeah.
You haven't even spoken about a piece of tech at all. You're talking about what's happening globally, or you're talking about politically.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Yeah, and there's so many ways now to distill that. And, you talking about the data that companies have, I remember talking about data lakes in like 2010. So it's that, even 2008. So there's so much data swilling around.
Well, data's a new currency.
And now it can actually be leveraged at scale.
Yes.
With AI, but it's just making sure, to your point earlier, that you're very outcome focused. So know the outcome that you want to get to, or you want to get the customer to first, and then.
Absolutely. And of course, with data, because data is the new currency, comes the challenge of how you secure that data down.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, again, is really where a lot of our partners are focusing their time and effort.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you can bluff.
No, it's not. Definitely not. And if it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong.
It's expensive. And under our new partner program, which launches in 9 months' time, we have one of our key pillars is security, because it's part of our core fundamentals inside our DNA. But that is where it's being led. All the other bits, collaboration, contact center, networking, we'll just do that as well, because we're a trusted advisor on your security. And you start spreading yourself across that cloud to end device.
Definitely.
Because it underpins everything, doesn't it? You can't do
everything needs to be secure.
Anything without it being secure
where it's at.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's only going to develop further, I think. And I think that, it always requires a customer to be a leader at some point.
Yeah.
So that others can follow.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, this is just my opinion, but I think inside the AI world, particularly in the mid-market, which is the SMB, which is the majority of UK market.
Yeah.
There is still waiting to see who leads in that particular segment.
Definitely.
Who's going to take the leap and invest, and then we'll sort of stand afar and watch what's happening and take the good from the bad.
And then everyone else will go,
make that mistake.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's a perfectly reasonable strategy, but somebody has to take the leap.
They do.
And that's where your proof of concept comes in.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
That was quick.
I know.
That
It was
was
really
quick. I
quick,
know,
didn't
it
it?
was
So I
does,
think
yeah.
this warrants a part 2.
Yes,
like
I
in
think
the
so.
future.
Yes,
So-
definitely.